So, good evening, everyone. I thank Dr. Malika Goyal and HOA for this opportunity. I hope you can see my slides. I'll be talking about current experience in retinal therapeutics, mainly related to diabetic macular edema, but also I'll be talking a bit about other applications of therapeutics in common diseases. With respect to DME, as in many diseases, we must be aware of some pivotal studies. There may be 50s of studies or hundreds of studies in many diseases, but it's impossible to remember the name of each study, the protocol, or the results to the last digit. It is extremely difficult, but some of them are key studies, the basic results of which we are all expected to know so that we can tell the patients what to expect with the treatment which we are giving. So for diabetic macular edema, for me at least, the most important studies are the DRCR protocol I, protocol T, and the MEAD study basically because it used steroid implant, and the other two protocols were anti-VEGF protocols. So protocol I was one of the first big studies evaluating anti-VEGF versus laser or intravitreal triamcinolone acetonide. And what was seen in that study, we all knew by the time that anti-VEGF ranibizumab was already being used for diabetic macular edema. But the key part of the study, which we all came to know, was about the role of laser in either improvement in vision or in reducing the number of injections. If you look at this graph, the deferred laser is the one in orange, which is above the green one. The green laser represents prompt laser, prompt macular laser. So surprisingly, what it showed was macular laser was not effective. Contrary to popular beliefs, it was not effective in either giving us better improvement in vision or in reducing the number of injections. So this was across the board of patients who had less vision at baseline. This one is less than 65 letters or even otherwise. And also patients were followed up for a long term. This is the 5-year results. Again, here you can see the patients who had deferred laser, that is beyond 16 weeks is only when they were eligible for laser. And even in the deferred laser, many of the patients did not receive any laser at any point of time. The unfortunate thing was even the number of injections was not reduced in these categories. And also, there was a big talk about earlier, there was anxiety or fear of increasing macular ischemia when we repeatedly gave anti-VEGF injections in the eye. There was an apprehension that anti-VEGFs may increase macular ischemia, but that was not the case based on the fluorescein angiography. So that was about ranibizumab, which was the first of the blocks for diabetic macular edema. But then we also have other options, including bevacizumab, aflibercept, and dexamethasone implant. And I'll be talking about briefly about protocol T, which compared the three anti-VEGFs which are available in general sense about bevacizumab, ranibizumab, and aflibercept. So this protocol T was a head-to-head comparison of a large number of patients, and this also looked at stratifying patients at baseline with good vision at baseline versus patients who had worse vision at baseline, with 20/50 being the cutoff. So in general, if you look at this graph, there was not much of a difference between aflibercept, ranibizumab, and bevacizumab. But if you look at bevacizumab in comparison to aflibercept, you start seeing some differences. This is the overall picture of the entire population in the study of DME. But if you look at the population who had worse vision at baseline, that is 20/50 or worse, then that's when you start seeing the difference that at least at 1 year, there was a difference between aflibercept and the other 20 VEGFs, although by year 2, ranibizumab caught up with aflibercept. There was not a significant difference at year 2. And you must also remember that ranibizumab used in this protocol T was 0.3 milligram, whereas normally, at least in India, there's only one dose available, which is 0.5 milligram. It was shown in the RISE and RIDE trials. They also had 0.3 and 0.5. In those trials also, they found that ranibizumab 0.5 milligram had a better outcome than zero point 0.3, but in Protocolti it was 0.3. So overall, what you can say is that if a patient has 20/50 or worse vision, that is about 612 to 618 vision, patient is in front of you, you can tell the patient that with aflibercept or ranibizumab, the patient is likely to gain anywhere between 15 to 20 letters. That's a huge amount of gain. But unfortunately, the number of injections required is very high, 8 to 9 injections in the first year itself. That's a huge burden with anti-VEGF in general for all diseases. And this is the graph for patients who had better vision at baseline, that is 612 or 6.9 vision at baseline. Those patients can be expected to improve by 1 to 1.5 lines, and it's all crowded over there. There's not much of a difference between any of these three anti-VEGF. So if your patient is having good vision at baseline, there's no significant difference, at least in efficacy. But if it's worse vision at baseline, looks like aflibercept has a slight edge over ranibizumab, maybe a little bit less over a period of 2 years. What about the OCT outcomes? Here, the clear winner is aflibercept. It has the maximum drying capacity among all three anti-VEGFs, and this is across the board, not just in DME. It's true for ARMD CNVM. It's true for RVO. And aflibercept has a better drying capability than the other two anti-VEGFs. But as I said, the injection burden is very high. While we all in practice tend to kind of downgrade it to as a 3 injection disease or a 3 month disease, at least initially when we talk to patients, you must be very careful and tell the patient, have a frank discussion that it's a long-term disease. It's not a 3 month disease. It's not a 3 injection disease. It can go on the first year, and definitely a lot of patients require injections even the second year also. And that's where you are going to think about a long-term implant, kind of what we have with the dexamethasone implant. Newer treatments are coming, including the port delivery system. You would be listening to quite a few of those talks now in ASRS about port delivery system of ranibizumab. But again, before that, we have this dexamethasone implant, which is approved for DME as well as RVO. How does this work? Dexamethasone implant, it has a mechanism of release in three phases. The first is the surface release, where the surface gets eroded a little bit. Then there is the diffusion phase, and then the bulk erosion. You can see that the dexamethasone implant, by the second month, 1 to 2 months, it starts getting eroded. And the MEAD study was the pivotal trial for dexamethasone implant in DME. And what it showed was patients who received dexamethasone implant had a significant improvement, at least in terms of more than or equal to 10 letters, that is 2 line gain in vision. And also the area under the curve, which was calculated, was much more than the sham treatment with laser. So overall, Dex implant had a lot of benefit in terms of long-term sustainability. But if you look at this subgroup analysis of phakic versus pseudo-phakic, in the phakic group, which is the top graph, you can see that the vision starts dropping, most likely due to cataract. And once the cataract surgery is done, they start gaining a little bit of vision back. But if you look at the pseudophakic population, the bottom graph, it's a sustained improvement. Although there are kind of a seesaw kind of effect or a sawtooth effect, that is because the effect of Ozurdex goes away, the edema comes and the vision drops. And then when the injection is repeated, the vision comes back. So, but then phakic patients, as we all know, can develop cataract, and also intraocular pressure is of a minor concern compared to intravitreal triamcinolone acetonide. Now, I'll be taking through way of some patient case reports, how we have managed some of these patients with both anti-VEGF as well as dexamethasone implant. This was a 51-year-old gentleman who came back in 2011. So we have kind of 9-year follow-up data, which I'll be showing. And one of the reasons why I'm showing is that diabetic macular edema can be an extremely chronic disease. And 9th year also, this patient is receiving injections. So it's not a 3-month disease. It's not a 3 injection disease. So this patient, when he came to us, he already had a history of diabetes of 10 years, HbA1c 7.8, which is not bad considering the kind of sugar levels we see in our patients, sometimes HbA1c of 10, 11, but 7.8 can be brought down further. And he did after 2 years, that is for the last 7 years or so. His HbA1c has always been around 6.5, never above 7. But initially when he came, it was off the marks. And he also had hyperlipidemia, and his vision in the right eye was 624, 20/80. Left eye vision was 6.6. But as you can see, the right eye had a center involving macular edema, and then the left eye had extra foveal edema. And uh, we used to do FA more often in those days. I can vouch that now FA has gone down significantly. At least I don't do as much as FA for, at baseline for all patients with diabetic retinopathy, but we used to do a lot more earlier. But you can see the leaking microaneurysms as well as the outer blood retinal barrier damage, that is the right column. You can see the late phase angiograms where you can see the diffuse leakage from the RP, outer blood retinal barrier. And this was the OCT macular edema in the right eye and the left eye. Left eye was not center involving. This patient got 3 injections in the right eye. By the time he had received 3 injections in the right eye, the left eye also started developing macular edema, center involving, although the vision was 6.6 still in the left eye. And the vision in the right eye had improved from 624 to 612. You can see the HbA1c is 8.1. It's not under control. And this patient after this was kind of erratic. He was lost to follow up. He used to travel a lot. He was in the corporate world, and systemic control is again further off the charts. It's at 9% now, and you can see that the edema in both eyes is worsening. I'm just going to summarize. The right eye, he had received multiple injections, was lost to follow up, which is not uncommon to see. Then he received again 4 Avastin injections that persisted. Now, kind of, and this was the story for the left eye also. And we were trying to see what can be the innovations or different approaches. So PPV for DME, he had received intravitreal triamcinolone acetonide also. Just excuse me. He had received intravitreal triamcinolone, and then it used to keep coming back again and again. Then he also had vitrectomy. Vitrectomy was combined with intravitreal triamcinolone. Vitrectomy was done only for macular edema. He did not have vitreomacular traction. He did not have ERM. He did not have any other membrane. So this vitrectomy was done purely for recalcitrant diabetic macular edema. And in spite of that, he kept on having recurrence of macular edema. But one thing which I learned over that is in a vitrectomized eye, don't give triamcinolone. They develop lots of floaters. They complain too much because of the floaters. It's better to give Ozurdex if at all you want to give. But then again, in spite of recurrent macular edema, we did PRP for macular edema. So this PRP was not for PDR, but it was for diabetic macular edema. Still, the patient kept on getting macular edema. Then he received multiple Ozurdex. Now, the good thing about Ozurdex is that it has similar pharmacokinetic PK properties in a vitrectomized eye as it is in a non-vitrectomized eye. So it's still a sustained release in a vitrectomized eye. He also received again anti-VEGF in the right eye, but ultimately he always has this parafoveal edema which keeps coming to the center, and then you give Ozurdex and it goes back. So far he has received about 4 injections of Ozurdex in the right eye after vitrectomy, and in the left eye he has received about 8 or 9 Ozurdex injections. But then it keeps going on and coming back. This is the last checkup. He hasn't come because of COVID after February, but you can see a lot of structural damage in the right eye. The second case is about a 53-year-old gentleman. Again, he had diabetic retinopathy, which was stable. But what story I would like to highlight is that cataract surgery, how it worsens the diabetic macular edema. This patient had on the first day, as usual, the success story of any cataract surgery, 6.6 on day one, but then the problems start occurring after 1 month or 3 months. This patient had came back with macular edema after 6 months, received 3 injections of anti-VEGF, and then it was still there. He was losing vision, and there was a long story of what all he received. But then we decided, let's try again vitrectomy with ILM peeling. And this patient at 1 year follow-up had still some macular edema, 618 vision, but at the end of 2 years, he's got this 6-9 vision or so, and he has been maintaining that. But it doesn't mean that all patients improve with vitrectomy and ILM peeling. There is enough literature to show that anatomically patients do improve, but visual gain is not much after vitrectomy. But this case was an exception where the visual improvement also occurred in this patient with vitrectomy apart from anatomical success. Just to switch gears, and I will be concluding shortly in about 2-3 minutes. The additional uses of DEX implant, which we have recently published in the Indian Journal of Ophthalmology, is another major problem of idiopathic epiretinal membrane. We all know that whenever we do membrane peeling for vitrectomy for ERM, you can have an increase in the edema. Embarrassingly, you see do an OCT 1 month after your VR surgery, the edema has increased, the patient's vision has dropped. The patient asks you, I was much better before the surgery. And what we have noticed is that we do tend generally counsel the patient. It's a long-term process after vitrectomy. It takes 6 months to recover. But we wanted to see whether we can shorten the recovery period after vitrectomy. And this bottom graph is the visual acuity. This is in logMAR. That's why lower the bar, better is the vision. The patients who received Ozurdex during vitrectomy, during membrane peeling, achieved their best vision at 1 month, whereas those who did not receive Ozurdex, their vision first worsened compared to baseline, and then over 6 months it caught up. So what this is showing is that if you give Ozurdex implant during membrane peeling, you're likely to achieve a faster recovery rather than wait for 6 months. And then this is also about the gain in 15 letters. The DEX implant groups had a better improvement. OCT thickness corresponds to the visual acuity. You have a dramatic response. At 1 month, the edema decreases substantially, whereas if you don't give an Ozurdex implant, you tend to have a slower response of reduction in macular edema. Even at 6 months, some patients have a lot of macular edema if you don't give Ozurdex. So this is just one patient comparison between the two groups. The top one is without DEX implant during vitrectomy. The edema keeps on persisting even at 6 months, whereas in the DEX implant one, you have at 1 month, you are getting a good anatomical improvement. Another new use which I have seen in DEX implant in ARMD is patients who are resistant to anti-VEGF. You have switched anti-VEGF, their edema is like this.
Another patient who had received 4 bevacizumab and 1 ranibizumab injection response.
So this is a patient who had received 4 bevacizumab and 1 ranibizumab, no response, massive edema, and this is just after a month and after 6 months after the injection of combination of DEX implant and ranibizumab. It's a tremendous improvement which you can see. So apart from this, I would just like to show that whoever wants to give injections, become medical retina specialist, should get trained in injections and also about their interpretation or decision making about injections. So this is a cataract surgeon who is trying to give Ozurdex injection. You need to be extremely careful. These are not regular injections of Avastin. So this at this time he has already touched the lens and the injection has been given into the lens. And then the phaco has been done, and along with the phaco, you can see that the Ozurdex implant has also been emulsified. So injections, medical retina is not to be taken lightly. You must get trained for them. And also you should look at the systemic control of diabetes in all the patients. This is something which we all keep mentioning in any DME talk, but usually what happens is we just tell the patient control your sugar, nothing happens. We must actually actively talk to their treating physician as to what we are looking at. Unless that happens, the patients may just say that, I have stopped eating rice, I'm taking my tablets every day. That's not the answer we want. So systemic control is extremely important. Thank you very much for your kind attention.